Well, I think one area where I get caught up in that, Peter, is that I think there should be a certain feeling associated with, that experience.
Right, and that's another fallacy of relating to things in terms of states. When you go to experience itself, one of the first things you discover is it can look like anything. It has no consistency. It has nothing that where it gives where there's a quality of this that's in any way better or worse than a quality of that. I didn't put that very well, but
I think it came across.
Yeah.
Like the sparklers.
Yeah.
There's no particular.
Yeah. When we have a simplistic understanding of experience, it's easy to grade it as this kind of quality is just spiritually desirable, and this kind of quality is less so. But experience itself isn't like that. Experience itself allows anything whatsoever, and there's nothing better or worse.
So the expectation is a frame of reference that's not helpful.
Exactly. Expectation is always conceptual. And assessment is always conceptual, even if it's very subliminal and intrinsic. Part of the problem with these frames of reference and conceptuality is a lot of times we do it subliminally, so it doesn't sound like a thought or a word, but it's just something it's a stance that we have integrated. We just held it to be. Yes. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So we don't even know necessarily we're thinking, but it just sort of a thought process does its thing and just spits out a certainty. Right. But any kind of expectation, any kind of assessment is always conceptual. Yeah. Because experience itself, reality itself, is absolutely impossible to assess. It has there's no yardstick. There's no up or down. There's no better or worse. There's no good or bad. It's just completely wide open. It's completely itself, but you can't say anything about it. You cannot pin it down one tiny bit.
I mean, that's tricky when you've got frames of reference that are not tangible.
Yeah, and that's the challenge. Is we hold most of the more insidious frames of reference we hold unconsciously. Mm-hmm. And some powerful ones are, I am the body frame of reference, or I am the doer frame of reference, or I'm me and everything else is not me frame of reference. All these kinds of things, we typically don't hold them consciously at all. We don't know they're a thought. We just think they're a fact.
Yeah. And
we're so integrated in that we're incapable of distinguishing between reality and this notion. We think they're one and the same. We think the notion is real, but it isn't. It's a thought.
And the same going back to the breath too. The expectation that there will be like some sort of sense of, which might be a complete heart attack or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the basic rule is if there's any assessment at all, or any judgment at all, or any value judgment, or anything, if you can say anything about it at all, you're in conceptualization. And even if it doesn't feel like you are. Yeah. Because the reality of presence, the reality of present experience as it actually is completely wide open. It's completely unaccessible. You can't say anything about it. It's impossible to, and it's manifestly and evidently and completely obviously that way. When you're with it, it's just, what can you say? No way. I mean, anything you say is a total, an absurdity. It's such a partial deviation and just in no way refers to the real thing.
I think that's where the words that, when I have conversations with people, it kind of takes me away from reality, or it's harder to kind of stick with reality because a lot of times I listen to the words and try to make an understanding.
Yeah.
And it's harder.
Right. That's why it's important to develop the habit of keeping going to the experiential presence. And then even when you're in a conversation or something, just keep coming back to experiential presence if you find yourself drifting off. And then your conversation will have more power because it will tend to be referential to what this really is, instead of spinning off into.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's gone from here to here.
Yeah.
And I can see that.
Because you'll find one of the side effects of this you'll find is you'll be much less easily swayed. People will not be able to argue with you or trip you up so much because you'll be able to see the fallacies in what they're saying right away because you keep coming back to your experiential reality, and people will sort of do a sleight of hand where they or do an assertion as if it was true, which conversationally can be very powerful. If you're talking to someone that isn't grounded in reality, you can just carry them away. But if someone that is grounded in reality, they'll have no power because you look at it and say, no, that's not true. That's ridiculous. That's not the case. And you will be empowered conversationally to the extent you have the habit of keep coming back more and more closely to your naked experience.
Yeah, I like what you were saying before about developing the ability to speak in a manner that coincides down the weaving path of reality.
Yeah.
Because
it tends to it's possible to tend to parallel it more. I mean, any speech deviates by its very nature, but the more it tends to parallel reality itself, the more powerful it is. Or the more accurate it is. And you get the added benefit that you don't need to remember as much because you can keep just looking at reality and talking about what you're seeing. So you can make it up as you go along and still be right on the money. You don't need to remember anything.
Regarding not being easily swayed and having this thing happen where I feel somehow reluctant or disinterested in getting involved in any kind of entertainments that I thought I'm accustomed to liking, like a film or a show or music or the news or anything like that. Suddenly it seems like there's like a lot of time or something.
Yeah, sure.
And then there'll be kind of a searching for something to get interested in, but then, no, that's not interesting, that's not interesting, that's not interesting. And it's almost like kind of a feeling of a dead zone or not knowing what to do with myself.
That's good. That's very good. It's a good symptom. I mean, not as a goal. But it shows you're disentangling yourself from your normal modes of engagement and your normal reference of busyness and what you invest your time in, which is very good. That means your normalcy is dissipated, which is excellent.
Right, and it feels like waiting.
Normalcy is a slang word for jail.
Right, right. Then I feel like I'm waiting for something to replace it or something. At the same time, it still feels like I'm under this spell. The subliminal thing seems like resonates because it seems like so much of it is a spell.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And going back to the car thing from the beginning, I've had the experience sometimes of playing with the frame of reference. So I feel like I'm driving down the road and I'm playing with the fact that maybe I'm moving. But then sometimes spontaneously there's a different thing that happens where suddenly wow, I am still and everything else is moving. And then something comes down and sort of stomps on that, and it all feels like beyond any thoughts or it's like just energetic.
Yeah, no, that's all great. That's all really good. Any kind of sort of destabilizing or drifting through these different modes is great. It's really good. Yeah,
so it's interesting because it's impossible to gauge, I guess, where I'm at or what's happening.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, it becomes less and less easy to gauge because there's less and less reference, which is a good thing. I mean, it's the whole point. And ultimately, you find there is no gauge. I mean, the actual condition is there's no gauge. You know, you aren't anywhere, really.
Yeah.
And you can't say anything about it. And realizing that is a certain milestone in terms of spiritual unfoldment, but it's only reference to itself. It's only reference to the event, not to anything objective.
Yeah.
But it's having more uncertainty and having more, kind of not knowing what's going on, but having old modes not really click for you. That's a wonderful symptom.
Yeah.
It's a good thing, and it's just a phase. So don't worry about it. Just relax in it, and again, always just try and go to the present vitality, the radiance, whenever you can, to whatever degree you can, whatever way you find that meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately your North Star. That'll take you through all that.
Yeah.
Set your compass to the radiant presence.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, Captain.
It'll steer you right.
You have no idea where you're going.
But it's right.
Well, stop thinking about where.
Essentially, you're not going anywhere. You don't have to worry.
Yeah.
You don't even need fuel, right?
Right. Yeah. Stop thinking about where.
There would just be small touchdown stations here and there.
So chai just comes to me.
Really? How fortunate.
Money just comes to me.
I mean, I grew up in another country where, the only thing I knew about America is what I saw in the movies. So when I came here, I actually thought that everything was like a movie. I actually thought that all of the streets would be kind of those fronts of buildings, with nothing at the back. There's some sort of notion that it was such a flimsy thing that it would just fall over if you touched it. So, it's been interesting to sort of try to come up with an evaluation there being some actual tangible experience here.
Good luck.
I had the same thing, but different movies.
Well, most of the world thinks that really America is just about the Western ghost towns, John Way.
Another area that I've noticed is that when I'm kind of just taking in reality, kind of touching reality, and then there's conversation happening.
Mm-hmm.
Lily might say something, John might say something, Irma might say something. I'm taking in all this reality, and the words happen, and I have less of a focus on those words.
Right.
And I could go to a focus on those words, and I could, hear what's going on really well.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's this push and pull of being in that specificity and versus
Yes.
being in this generality.
Yeah. And ultimately you discover there's not an either or there. As you gain more and more facility, you'll be able to be with conversations and have them not detract from being in this inconceivability at all. And what you're describing is a big step towards that, where you can hear a conversation and hear its ideas, but at the same time there's sort of a small event in this vastness, as opposed to sort of bang, getting snapped into that as everything.
Yeah.
It's learning. It's a kind of a learning a fundamental multitasking, learning that experience is always doing all aspects of itself at no loss to everything else it's doing, and inclusively. So, when you're thinking, you don't stop seeing. When you're being specific, you don't stop spacing out. When you're being in the waking world, you don't stop dreaming or being in deep sleep. And all of these different modes of energy, and many more, which are totally undemarcatable, are all occurring simultaneously, and they don't infringe on each other at all. They don't impede each other. You can be very logical and rational and coherent and follow a complex train of thought, and at the same time be because in actuality you are. It's just a matter of letting yourself relax so that you can appreciate the multitasking without thinking you need to, I need to focus here. No, I need to focus here. No.
Yeah, it's very whipping boy-esque,
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you should pay attention to what people are saying, and you should be here, and it's like.
But you'll discover you don't really need to pay that much attention to participate very fully. You'll discover you can have a really involved conversation with someone at the same time, just sort of be spacing out. Speaking from experience.
Well, what is attention then?
Well, it's very interesting. This is a very good question, and to go there, check it out. That's a great diving board. Ask yourself, what is attention, and just dive into the presence of attention and swim around in it, see what it is. It's fascinating what it is, but it's astounding. It's a very weird, very strange, magical power that's intrinsic in this, and it's very slippery and very subtle and very interesting and very miraculous.
I can't see that there's any volition. It seems to just occur.
Sure. Well, there may or may not be. It may be something kind of like the breath, where there can be some kind of volitionality, but some kind of automatism simultaneously. Because volitionality as well is a subtle thing. It's not exactly nothing, but it's not what it seems at first superficially either. And it's very much parallel to what attention is. It's very much parallel to what specificity is. I mean, all these properties are fascinating because they aren't simple. They ultimately resolve into this itself, and what this is not simple. It's inconceivable.
Well, fundamentally, I feel like I'm just on totally new ground because
Yeah.
Everything that was an idea just is virtually meaningless.
Yeah.
So, how do you?
Sorry.
It's like that.
But that's not a problem, because when you lose ideas, you haven't actually lost ideas, because they're still around and you'll still be able to use them. I mean, here you are talking.
Sort of.
Yeah, no, you're doing fine. You're doing as well as ever.
That's
I find that my ability to pay attention has changed.
Yeah, me too. Very much.
In what way?
Here, here.
I can pay attention. And disregard the conversation that goes on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
Before I couldn't disregard the conversation.
Well, that's very interesting.
I think that when you're more in confusion, attention is very fickle and sort of attitudinal. You know, it has a chip on its shoulder or something. But the more you get into a kind of a when you're in reality more, there's a relaxation and an ability. Attention doesn't. I mean, attention is kind of like when you're more in confusion. Attention is kind of like a bucking bronco, where you have to sort of pull it and it shoots off somewhere, and it's very willful. But attention just becomes a steady flow, and you develop the ability to really be present with something effortlessly and like a spontaneous flow of being with something without needing to hold it there. And so attention can become much more powerful in my experience.
You are presence, right?
Of course.
So it's like realizing that would be...
You get to take advantage of it. Again, it's hard to pin down, but it's a noticeable phenomenon.
Well, I'd say I noticed that I've been noticing the same thing as I've been having more of an ability to pay attention to whatever's going on. And I was at this internet meeting, and it's relatively, the intensity level of this meeting for me was a lot. And I got home and my head hurt for all the tension and the new, everything new that I was trying to grasp. So I was able to pay attention, but I hadn't reached that level of just ease and flow of it.
Yeah.
But I have, on the opposite level, if I hadn't had enough ease and attention to be able to be with it, I wouldn't have been able to take it all in.
Right. Yeah.
No, I think it's very refreshing to have, deep experience of integration without having a spaced outness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That it's very accessible. It's very
Absolutely.
right here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't have to go anywhere to have it. I
No.
don't. It's very tangible.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I call this a presence, and that's I think a profound way of putting it, because it is most intimately present, most intimately accessible, and yet inconceivably powerful and potent as a point of integration, as a point of revelation, all of this. It's really all about just coming to appreciate how powerful this presence is, how profound it is, without needing to be other than what it already is. It's an inconceivable profundity, inconceivable potency. And we belittle it, we don't appreciate it. When we're in ignorance, we just think, oh, of course it's present, I'm here, what's going on, what's on TV, But this presence is when you can appreciate it, it is so inconceivably profound in every way, so valuable, so transcendental, without being somewhere else. It's transcendental, but it's completely accessible, completely present, completely intimate, right here, always.
feel that presence as a very vibrational, very bedrock level. And like John was saying, I mean, I've known it's always, I take it for granted, and it's kind of reintegrating a respect of that, and a knowledge of it, and a being with it.
And the more we're with it nakedly, the more it reveals itself as having inconceivable, astounding, profound aspects and dimensionality and open-endedness and profundity that, again, we've always kind of known, but we tend to devalue it or think, or I don't know what, we just sort of somehow are all twisted up about it, All of which is simultaneously profoundly integrative and profoundly expansive. So it's
in and out.
Yeah, it integrates us into the unity of our being, and at the same time opens that being into an inconceivable vastness, inconceivable multidimensionality. Just right here, just through this presence right here.
Because to touch that vibration is to touch the vibration of the universe.
Yes. Yeah. And to see that it is you. It is you. It is your presence that is the presence of the universe.
I haven't quite got there yet, but I can touch it.
Cool. So just be with it to whatever degree you can, and it'll do the work.
I wouldn't know how to manipulate it.
Peter, there's a question on the internet.
Yeah.
Let's see, the question is Trecho
Yes.
and Togo.
Yes.
Could Peter say something about his understanding of these terms?
Yes. Trekcho, it means resting in true nature, resting in this, resting in non-conceptual being, which is inalienably always present, and yet we typically have not realized its presence. We are distracted with all sorts of ideas about what we think it is. When we discover this presence, this inalienable presence that is always the case and that cannot not be the case, and simply let ourselves rest in this self-evident presence of being, this is what Trecho is. Togel is the discovery that intrinsic in what this is a spontaneous creativity, a spontaneous radiance, a spontaneous a tendency to manifest as structure, as form, as nuance, as energy, and Togel is the practice of specifically attending to this, of noticing this, of tuning into the radiance of the radiant presence, the radiance, the creativity, the spontaneous, inherent creativity of this beingness, and noticing that this beingness is what everything is doing all beingness. All beingness is this incredible, inconceivable, essentially miraculous radiance, creativity, spontaneous creativity of this inherent miraculous being. In Togel, specifically, there are various practices that are designed to enhance the noticing of the radiance, among them certain yogic postures that you hold the body in, certain gazes, you would use the eyes in certain ways of breathing, and typically gazing at an open sky or an open field of light. They also do various practices involving retreating in absolute darkness, shutting yourself up in a space where there's absolutely zero light, various other specific things. But all of these tricks are secondarily secondary aspects of noticing this inherent radiance, the creativity of this radiance, and they're largely unnecessary. Within the Bonpo tradition, they don't differentiate between Chekcho and Toga. They say that simply being with the natural presence, being with being itself, there's a tendency to naturally notice the radiant presence and the radiant aspect of it. And so Trecha spontaneously tends to go towards Toga. We begin to notice the effervescence of being. So that's a little bit about those two things.
Okay.
But the primary point of the whole thing is discovering, noticing, and being with this spontaneous presence, this real being that is here spontaneously, is doing itself, and that everything ultimately is. That's the point of all of that. Without that, there's none of it. There's no Dzogchen, there's no true spirituality, in fact. So the cardinal point is just being with this non-conceptual, actual beingness that is spontaneously present, and then just seeing that this beingness includes everything whatsoever, and staying with that.
Yeah.
And then the radiance, the noticing the radiance develops out of that as your sensitivity, and the depth of your experience with this deepens.
There's one more question.
Yeah.
Is there any specific relationship between lucid dreaming and unfoldment?
No. Lucid dreaming is a nice illustration of the relationship between seeing things from within a frame of reference and seeing what they actually are. But it's not important in itself.
Getting back to when you were explaining about the Trekchol and Togo, I'm starting to read a little bit now about. I have a hard time pronouncing that, word, that type of.
Well, it's not important. It's Tibetan. None of us in this room can say
anyway, what is the term that I'm
Cho or something?
Yeah, Cho.
Togal?
Yeah, Togo. So I'm starting to read that, and it became a lot of these, what he's talking about, and the way his life was unfolding. I could recognize it so much just from what I've been doing since I've been following your teachings.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true that it is, this is just so accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many. My favorite term now is everything is grist for seeing it.
Yeah. There's no opposite of this.
No, I mean I can look at anything I'm doing during the day, and I can go back and forth. Even going back and forth, what you were talking about is educational.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's like I'm in Zen school all day.
Yeah. I mean, that's the nice thing about this kind of spiritual work, and specifically in Dzogchen they talk about this, is because it's not constructed. The intrinsic being, the being that is already being, the inherent event that is already happening is doing all the work. So that the spiritual path is being itself. Being itself is the spiritual path, is the practice. So there's nothing that needs to be created, there's nothing that needs to be added to it, there's nothing that needs to be done in addition to what's already happening. Simply being with what's already happening as it is the path of revelation, the path of unfoldment.
I think the term you use is strategy, but there are strategies.
Sure, yeah, all kinds of tricks and strategies.
And tricks.
Yeah,
tricks is even a better word, more fun.
Sure. And all these tricks are useful, but ultimately all they do is bring us back to the intrinsic event, to this beingness right here, this radiant presence.
Yeah, but that idea of coming back or being back is very powerful because Also as you said, as I'm starting to unfold and notice more. I mean, I recognize it. It's not strange, and it has. I mean, it's been. I mean, since I was probably a little girl. I mean, I can. It's very powerful. I can. It's. It's like having this wonderful, beneficent uncle around with me all the time, a guardian,
Absolutely.
and it's been here.
Yes.
And it's. It's just. Oh, how do you do? Hey, that's great. Nice to see you again.
No, it's lovely. Yeah, it's really just a recognition of this presence and the wonderfulness of it and the astoundingness of it, the miraculousness of it, and the benevolence of it.
Yeah.
And that this presence answers all questions, solves all problems, removes the possibility of anything being an issue, really. And continues to do so more so and deeper the more you keep coming back to it, keep being with it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, of course, very soon you discover you can't possibly not be with it.
Well, that sounds good.